Hey there, Tamir from Fibonaccis-Traders.com here with the daily market recap video for Monday, November 14th. Let's dig in the charts. Let's see what SPY and Friends brought us today. SPY closing the day below this trend line here with a doji. This trend line represents the higher highs on the short term since early October, then throughout end of October, beginning of November, and now higher high. Here we have this gap here on the 381 area. This gap will get filled, and as we know, more than 80% of all gaps will get filled throughout time. So for this gap, the sooner the better. So bulls can make a higher low. We have this low here, and filling this gap before the next leg up, making a higher low. But let's see how market will react for tomorrow PPI's numbers, 8:30 Eastern time. But now we have a doji of a trend line which represents maybe a short-term trend reversal going to fill this gap here. So follow the price and use the levels to manage the risk. QQQ, also a doji resting on the 284 area, and if we look left, this 284 area represents an important level of support and resistance. If we look left and go all the way back to May earlier this year, we see that 284 support, resistance, support, resistance, resistance, and now might acting as a short-term support. But we have also this gap here that needs to get closed, needs to get filled if bulls wants really to take control back to their hands and making a higher low. So let's see what the rest of the week will bring for the Qs. IWM went almost all the way to this trend line here, and as we identified this trend line few weeks back, this trend line goes all the way from November 2021 highs, then August 22 highs, and now November 22 high. Doji of this trend line, another doji on Monday, and this gap here needs to get filled, and again the sooner the better, so the IWM can hold the short-term higher lows and higher highs for an uptrend reversal before the next attempt to break up and above this trend line. And if you want to go in-depth trend line and why trend lines are the true support and resistance area for price action, check the link for a short video I made. Link will pop just about now over here, and I will put it also on the comments below, so check it out. Let me know what you think. Dow Jones keeping its strength above this trend line here. This trend line is a long-term downtrend line that represents the lower highs since January of 2022, April 22, August 22, beginning of November, tried, failed, and gapped up above, and now holding above it on the 340 area, an important level of support and resistance. Always look left to identify major and important levels of support and resistance for price action. And as we see, 340 area from support to resistance, resistance, and now again resistance. Doji, we might go back retesting this trend line as a support. We might even close this gap here, because again, more than 80% of all gaps will get filled. So the sooner the better for the bulls to fill this gap, making higher lows, higher highs before the next leg up. VIX, after a flash to the downside, since we identified this break on this trend line here, now let's see if 24 area that came from support will act as a resistance, and VIX will go fill this gap, because VIX does not have any gaps throughout time. All gaps on the VIX are getting filled throughout time. You can go back left and check it out. No gaps on VIX. So if you see a gap on the VIX, it will get filled 100% of the time. Dollar index, after fallout and a breakdown below this uptrend channel, now all the way to the 106 looking left, is an important area of support and resistance throughout 2022, now acting as a short-term support. Let's see if dollar index can continue the downtrend towards the 104 and maybe to the 100, but after this major fallout, we expect some kind of a relief bounce toward the 108, because the 108 was an important support, so it will get retested as a resistance. So keep your eyes on the dollar index. US 10-year to the 3.8 after failing again and again and again to break up and above this trend line here. This trend line is an uptrend line that goes all the way back to May of 2021, then here May 22, June 22, September 22, October and early November. Let's see if we can get continuation to the downside towards this trend line that represents the higher lows since December of 21. Again, trend lines, follow them. They are the true support and resistance for price action. So study them, learn them. It will help you to grow as a trader. Apple, after a nice bounce from the 134 area, this 134 area looking left throughout 2022, important area of support, now bouncing all the way to the 150 area. Doji, let's see Apple, how it react for tomorrow PPI numbers. We have this gap here. Let's see if this gap here will validate the 80% of all gaps getting filled. So keep your eyes on Apple. Tesla, basically moving sideways. This gap here is filled, no gap. Friday closed that gap. Now Monday brought us another inside day. Bulls are struggling to break up and above, back above the 200 area. 177 is the short-term support, breaking down and under, and we can get 163 to the downside and 147 to the downside. 147 is a major support resistance area in 2020. So failing to hold the 177, 147 will arrive. Meta is next. Many gaps on Meta. We have this gap here on the 127 area, and we have gaps to the downside, this gap here and this gap here. Let me know in the comments below, which gaps do you think will get filled first on Meta? The above gap here or the gaps to the downside? Follow price and use the levels to manage the risk, because this is the only thing as traders we have control of, risk management. We can never know what will happen next. We trade one candle at a time in a series of candles, managing the risk. I use Fibonacci levels to manage the risk. Find your own path. Do your own due diligence. Stop following others. Take ideas, learn them, but always do your own due diligence. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and until the next video, stay safe.